Welcome to the Homeschool Show from North Carolinians for Home Education. Our goal is to help you homeschool with confidence and joy. I'm your host, Matthew McDill, and we have as our co-host again this week, T.S. and Smack.
Hello.
And Neo.
Hi.
We have to be quiet.
Yes.
He's taking a nap. But I'm not going to whisper. He'll be fine. All right. Tell us what we got going today.
Okay, so for homeschool news, we're going to continue our journey through the history of homeschooling in North Carolina. It's so good. So we left off with the battle, the legal battle. So we'll pick up there.
That's right.
And today, for homeschool conversations, we'll hear a conversation that you had with Dr. Brian Ray of the National Home Education Research Institute about a study on abuse. The homeschool tip of the week, we're going to talk about, you're going to talk about treating your children with gentleness. And then the homeschool help segment with Amanda. She's going to tell us how to get our homeschool students a driver license here in North Carolina.
Are you close to that?
Yeah, next year. Ooh. I know. So I'm like, I actually need that tip, which is crazy.
All right.
Yeah, crazy.
Okay, so we're going to pick up with homeschool news, our historical news, right? We're going back to pick up where we left off. After the Del Conte case, which made homeschooling legal in North Carolina, NCHE focused on lobbying and teaching homeschoolers how to lobby. As we said last time, they were getting ready for a battle that they thought was coming. And by the way, the topic here is the bill proposed in 1987 to severely restrict home education. And we're going to see how NCHE, how homeschool families responded. They knew that the time would come when they had to fight in the General Assembly to keep their right to homeschool. They encouraged homeschoolers to contact their legislators with these three messages. Number one, North Carolina homeschoolers are committed, conscientious, law-abiding, intelligent, and friendly people.
I think
sounds like a wonderful, excellent.
I know. I think that describes them perfectly.
We should keep that message going. Number two, homeschools are an effective means of education.
Absolutely.
Still true?
Yes.
Number three, our desire is for our existing protection under the 1979 church school law to be left untouched. So that was what they were operating under at the time. In April 1987, the Department of Public Instruction, DPI, proposed legislation entitled, quote, an act to permit home instruction under certain conditions as a means of complying with compulsory school attendance requirements. Under this proposed legislation, homeschools would be under the authority of DPI and local board of education. Homeschool teachers would be required to have a college education and to teach a state-approved curriculum. This proposal also required a 6-hour school day and gave the local school authorities the ability to deny permission for a family to homeschool based on a twice-a-year subjective review of their homeschool.
Interesting.
A lot of power.
I know.
As soon as NCHE heard of this potential bill, we responded immediately, asking homeschoolers to write, phone, and visit their legislator right away. On April 17, 1987, Representative Tyndall introduced HB 837 for its first reading. And of course, HB is House Bill. Okay. This bill was identical to the DPI proposal. Immediately, NCHE members began to flood Raleigh with letters and calls. On April 30th, Senator Marvin introduced Senate Bill SB 779, which was virtually identical to HB 837. So they can introduce the same bill in the House and the Senate at the same time.
Interesting.
And sometimes it makes its way through one faster or the other, and then it has to go to the other.
Gotcha. Okay.
So that's why two are going at the same time, because they can. Then on May 1st, while SB 7, that's right. On May 1st, Senator Hardison introduced a substitute bill, SB 708, which was a proposal put forward by DNPE Director Rod Helder. While SB 708 was less restrictive than HB 837 and SB 779, NCHE lobbied against it as well as the other two bills. Okay. On May 14th, both Senate bills came before the Senate Education Committee, and they were both sent to a subcommittee for additional study. By May 18, SB 779 had received an unfavorable report, and there had been no action taken on SB 708. From May 19 through August 11, HB 837 went through several subcommittee and committee meetings, was revised 5 times, and finally passed its third reading in the House. During this time, it became apparent that DPI, the Department of Public Instruction, was orchestrating the entire process. The House passed HB 837, and because there was money requested for the 1987-88 fiscal year, it went to the Senate Appropriations Committee for approval. When the 87 legislative session came to an end, HB 837 was still waiting for Appropriation Committee approval. With the State Board of Education backing these bills and HB 837 having already been passed by the House, it seemed inevitable that both bills would pass in the 1988 short legislative session. But the story was not over.
There we go.
NCHE continued our efforts to defeat this bill during the off-season, and it made a difference.
Wow.
Several NCHE leaders volunteered countless hours lobbying the legislators, attending meetings, keeping NCHE members informed, and fighting this bill. Their sacrificial giving of their time and efforts in rallying homeschoolers from across the state saved us from having to live with an onerous homeschool law. And here's Debbie's personal note. Okay. I remember this time of intense lobbying. It was a ton of work. So obviously she's one of them who volunteered and sacrificed her time to be a part. Letters written, phone calls made, long distance calls, back when there was those,
it mattered.
and trips to Raleigh. Today we take for granted how easy communication is. But back then there are no emails, no cell phones, and long distance calls cost money. And to get the word out, we used phone chains.
Wow.
Much of the work was done late at night because long-distance calls were cheaper at night.
Sheesh.
So that's what Debbie did. Next week, we'll learn what specific steps homeschool families took to defeat these bills.
I just love how she said the story was not over.
Yeah, it's not over.
It's just kind of encouraging even in your own life. Whatever's going on, the story's not over.
And sometimes you face a situation where you're like, well, it looks like we lost.
Yeah.
But you don't accept that.
Yeah.
You say, well, we're going to fight. We're going to keep fighting.
Love
and
it.
That's hope.
Yeah. So today we'll hear a conversation that you had with Dr. Brian Ray of the National Home Education Research Institute on a study about abuse.
Yep, let's check it out. Okay, we're at the HSLDA Leaders Conference 2022. I'm here with Dr. Brian Ray with the Home Education Research Institute. We have you on the show all the time.
Well, I've been here. It's good.
And we're always following the research that comes out, and we usually put it on our news and discuss it, but it'll be great to talk with you directly. One of the most important things that came out recently was the one on abuse.
Yes.
And that research.
Yep.
Tell us about that and the significance of it.
So I would say for at least 10 years, I've been thinking about this study because, a lot of people have seen over the years, unfortunately, sadly, every now and then there's a story in the news about a family that is either allegedly or actually is homeschooling their children, and then parents do something evil. And so it gets into the news, and all of a sudden it's associated with homeschooling. And I think that's a lot because homeschooling is a minority. Even though homeschooling has grown tremendously in America and all over the world, it's still the minority. When a minority group does something, people pay attention.
Yeah.
So then the question arises, do homeschool families or parents, are the children experiencing any more or less abuse and neglect than those who are in public or private schools? So we've been wanting to do this study for a long time.
Right.
There have been allegations by especially some academics and some other people who say they're interested in responsible home education, but they talk about if only we could control people more, if only we could control humans more, they would not do
They wouldn't do evil things.
They want to do evil things,
Great premise.
And that's a worldview, right? That's a worldview. So anyway, been wanting to collect data, and finally got the funding. It takes money to do research.
That's right.
You got to have a researcher to do research. You have to have people who will participate in the research to do research. So all of this finally came together a while back, over a year ago, and we were able to collect the data. So I want to mention before I forget how I got a research colleague, been wanting to have more researchers involved with me on studies. And Dr. Danish Shakil, we call him Danny, Dr. Danny Shakil, he's here, and he'll be presenting with me this week.
Great.
So that's really cool. So we got a sample, a representative sample nationwide of adults, 18 to 38 years old. And then we asked them retrospectively about their lives growing up. So this is the first study of its kind. It's very exciting. So we asked them the basic questions like demographics, how was your family rich, poor, not growing up? What kind of experiences did you have growing up? Where are you today? What's your education level? All those kinds of things that researchers ask, right? Demographics, those are called the demographics. Like, what is this population like other than the main point of the study?
Okay,
So the main point of the study is going to get to what were your experiences, good or bad, growing up. So we got our sample. We worked with Barna to help us get this good sample, this representative sample.
Okay.
In research, you talk about representative samples, right? You want to know that this is like the people you're going to generalize to. So we got all that. Now, we come to the question.
Right.
Was it any different for those who were home educated versus those who were, and we lumped conventional schooling. So in our study, we did not separate out public and private.
Okay.
But we lumped them together. So
Right. Classroom
yeah,
education.
conventional, we called it conventional,
Okay.
yeah. So your institutional,
Right.
institutional school compared to those who were home educated. And we got a whole history on them. How many years they were homeschooled, how many years they were in public school, how many years they were in private school. We got all those. It's a cool study for a researcher, So then we get to the end and we do the analysis. Well, what happened? So follow this carefully. If you only look at type of schooling, conventional compared to home, we saw some slight differences. And in research, you talk about statistically significant differences. And then there's another term that's not well defined, practical differences.
Okay.
So we did see some statistical differences with some more of some poor experiences in homeschooling. Now, some people want to say, let's stop there, see, bad. But here's what you have to do as a researcher and thinking logically. Say, yes, if you try to make these groups the same on their demographics, income level of family, education level of parents, race, ethnicity, how many years in foster care, all these things, now we can statistically control for all those backgrounds. The differences disappear, gone. So you look at that and say, well, this is not a cause and effect study, this is a correlation study. That's important for everybody to remember.
Right.
So in this correlation, does that correlation exist anymore after you take into account all these things? No, it's gone. So the first answer is demographics matter, school sector does not matter when it comes to abuse and neglect. So now some people say, well, that's kind of dull, that's a null finding, no difference. Yeah, it's a no difference.
But it's important.
And no differences are extremely important in
very important.
life, in politics, in research. So that's called a null effect. So that's the first big finding. Then, by all these data we collected, we were able to ask, what was the bad experience you had, the evil thing that was done? When did it happen in your life? Was it first grade, second grade, third grade? And who did it to you? So we got very specific. And when we narrowed that down, so we talked about perpetrator and place.
Okay.
And when it came to place, within those who were home educated, it was not statistically significant at home, and for the relatively low rate of abuse and neglect it was happening outside of the home. So that's the second answer. It was not parents and family who were doing the bad things. It was more outside the home. Say, for example, maybe at a museum, maybe at sports event, maybe at sports practice, maybe at a cooperative or something like that. So those are the two big findings. Sector, whether you were homeschooled or not, compared to conventional school, no significant difference. Within those who were home educated, who experienced bad things, it was not significant at home, it was significant outside of home. That's it.
So, how at first it was more homeschool, and then you said, but when you took in the other things in consideration.
Right.
How does that work? What were those things? Were those the demographics?
Yes, yeah, those are the demographics. So, and by the way, this study is now published in a peer-reviewed journal. Very excited about that.
Yes.
And so people can go online
yeah.
and get the whole 30-some
Okay.
page report, and you get all the details. So you would go to NHERI, NHERI.org, research, and then you'll find the study, and you get the whole thing, linking you over to a journal. So to answer your question, yeah, I mean, if you do a very simple thing, you say, well, your homeschool kids have higher test scores than those in the public school. Hey, yeah. They say, yeah, but what if homeschool kids on average come from only rich families,
Yeah.
only brilliant dads, only brilliant moms, and only people who emphasize academics
Yeah.
a lot? Well,
That's not fair.
That's not fair. That's not really homeschooling public school. That's way different kind of family.
Yeah. Okay.
So now what we say is let's take the demographics, the background of, the parent education level, mom's education level, dad's education level, wealthy or not family.
Comparing similar things.
Similar
Okay.
things. Single parent,
Got
not
it.
single parent. So you want to compare the old apples to apples.
Apples to apples.
So the
Got it.
statistics, we have the methods that can make it more like apples to apples.
So this kind of research is important for the homeschool community, for example, because if there are people who are wanting responsible homeschooling, or what that translates into is more regulation, it's important to establish that this is not a reason. This is not an excuse, I guess, to. And so I think what you're doing is important, and as you said, research requires money, so you wouldn't mind if people wanted to contribute.
Wouldn't mind
to,
at all.
To NARI,
Wouldn't mind at all. Yeah.
to help keep this going.
Right. Yeah. It's true. I mean, NARI is a nonprofit, and so we rely largely on donations. And NARI has been in existence now 32 years.
Congratulations.
Dr. McGill,
Wow.
32 years. It is the leading research organization on home education in the world. It's been around the longest.
Yeah.
You do the searches, you're going to pop up, it's going to come up, NARI and all the research. So we want to keep that going.
That's right.
We want solid research, honest research. We want research that comes from a sound worldview. And people say research from a worldview. Well, the fact is, professors at University of North Carolina, professors at Oregon State University, all have a worldview.
That's right.
And that influences the questions they ask and how they do the research.
That's right.
Yeah.
Thanks for being with us. Thanks
Welcome.
for sharing in your work.
Thank you.
Right.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, we're going to walk right into the homeschool tip of the week, and the tip is pretty basic, and that is treat your kids with gentleness.
Okay.
It's kind of hard to do
Yeah.
sometimes. Last night, I was trying to play some music on the stereo in my living room,
Okay.
and it was broken. So I go over there and look at it, and like something had been jammed into the
no.
speaker outlet. And I was just, my blood starts boiling. And I'm just like, why can't stuff just not break all the time at my house? I've had stories like that here before. So that irritates me. And this is an opportunity to exercise gentleness, self-control. How am I going to respond? I'm not a gentle person naturally.
I wouldn't know
You
that.
know, well, any gentleness I have, the Lord has given to me. I'm not joking at all. He can change you, and so one of the reasons I came to this point of thinking about gentleness was starting from Ephesians 6:4,
Okay.
which says, "Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger,
Yes.
but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord." And as you know, we serve every kind of homeschool, every religion, every race, every background.
Absolutely.
But we especially love helping people help their children follow Christ.
Yes.
And so that's what this verse is about, bringing up your children in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. One of the parts, though, that caught my attention is provoking your children to anger. I thought, well, how do you do that?
Yeah.
So that's when I discovered Proverbs 15:1, which says, "A gentle answer turns away wrath,
Yeah.
but a harsh word stirs up anger." Like, there it is. How would I provoke my children to anger?
Harsh words.
By speaking harshly to them.
Yeah.
And I'm going, okay. And so it's just such an encouragement to step back out of those situations and say, okay, you know what? That is irritating. That costs money. But my relationship with my child, my opportunity to love them, my opportunity to connect with them, their value, treating them with respect the way that you would want to be treated is so much more important.
Yes, it is.
You know, and so you process that, you think about that, and you can choose. And God can change you.
Yeah.
You know, He absolutely can, and He does. So if that's something that I think most parents struggle with anger, struggle with irritation because stuff gets messed up, stuff isn't quiet, you know, whatever it is, to keep your eye on raising them in the Lord.
Yeah.
How are they going to end up? How are we influencing them? How are we affecting them? And not on is all my stuff where I want it.
Yeah.
I can't find this. I can't find that. You know, this is broken.
Yeah.
Those things, in the end, in the long run, just aren't that important.
Well, I gotta ask, how did the story end? You find your speaker broken.
I did. So
what did you do?
So I started interrogating everybody. Right? Who did this? Who touched this? And everybody's like, I did not. do that." So finally, I found out that my oldest teenager at home was trying to play some music when his friends are over.
Okay.
So he's out of town now. When he comes back home,
You're
I'm
gonna
not going to be
respond
angry.
gently.
Very gently, I'm going to say, my speakers cost. And you can buy them for me.
Gently.
That's right.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, no, that's a great tip, especially with me. I have a lot of little kids. And even today, they were playing with the window, and my son smashed Nova's finger. And he's such a sensitive boy. You know, the first thought is to be like, you shouldn't have done that, and then comfort the little one. But I picked her up, and I saw the look in his eyes of just like, you know, and that was one of those moments. I was just where I was able to just say, it's okay. And he calmed down, and she calmed down, and it was okay. And it doesn't always go that way, but it's good when you can catch it with all these little people running around.
All right, let's check the Homeschool Helps with Amanda.
Hi there, welcome to Homeschool Helps with Amanda. Today, we are going to talk about driver's ed. Something that if you have a teenager, you definitely have it on your mind. How do we do driver's ed as homeschoolers? Well, it's pretty simple, but it can seem complicated and daunting if you've never done it before. So I'm going to give you just simple, the step-by-step, what do you do to get your child driving in North Carolina as a homeschooler. So first off, they need to take driver's ed. They need to take a state certified driver's education course. Where do you find that course? 1, your local public high school. You can contact them on their website or call them and ask. Find out when their class is being held and how do you sign up for it. Sometimes that can be a little competitive. They fill up pretty fast, so you want to start researching that ahead of time. Next, consider contacting a local private school. A lot of times the local private school is very welcoming to homeschoolers and is happy to have your student sit in on their driver's ed class and participate in that. So that's another option. Last but not least, you might consider hosting a homeschool specific driver's ed class. I know in my area, the North Carolina Driving School is the company that is contracted to provide that certified driver's education class in this area, which is the center of North Carolina. And I just contact them and they're able to provide the teacher and the materials. And I just came up with the location and the students, and we had a homeschool specific driver's ed class. That was really nice. It was more flexible for my students and they were able to have class with their friends. It was a great option. So maybe consider that if you have a company like that in your area. So once they take driver's ed, they finish the class, they will get a driver's education completion certificate. So you need that. Then you will contact the North Carolina Department of Non-Public Education, or DNPE, and get their driver's eligibility certificate. This is important. They're two different things. So you get from DNPE, you get that driver's eligibility certificate, or DEC. You request it and they mail you a hard copy in the mail. Once you get that hard copy, you will take it, don't sign it because it's only valid for 30 days once it's signed. So you've got your driver's education completion certificate, your driver's eligibility certificate, and you'll get that and whatever birth certificate or whatever other ID you need, and go to your DMV, and your student will take their test and get their permit. That's it. Not so hard. I really hope that helped you today.
Thanks for joining us this week. We'd love to hear from you, so send your questions and feedback to the Homeschool Show at nche.com. And please help others find this show by subscribing, rating, and leaving a review on Apple Podcasts and on YouTube. And if you think this will be helpful to your family, your friends, please share it. To find out how to subscribe to our show, you can go to nche.com/The Homeschool Show. And until next time, keep homeschooling with confidence and joy.